Tom Phillips directs The Joker, maybe the most controversial movie of the year, for every wrong reason, by the way. And I'm going to give you my review on this video of The Joker. And as you know, when I do my movie reviews, man, I'm real deal. This is not a political bias or political agenda or any of that BS. Honestly, guys, I'm going to be 100% with you. If you see a review of The Joker, yes, this movie does have some political subtext to it, but if you see a review of this movie and they are pushing that narrative more than talking about the film itself, unsubscribe. Just unsubscribe. We've had it with these freaking people, right? We've had it with them. Let's talk about the movie itself. Is this movie good? So on this video, on this review, it's going to be a non-spoiler. I'm coming back with a spoiler review tomorrow. So my job here is to ask you, or not to ask you, to tell you, or to answer the question that you may be asking, should I see this movie? Okay, first of all, directed by Todd Phillips. He's a director, producer, and writer of this movie, along with Scott Silver, starring Joaquin Phoenix as Arthur Fleck, who eventually metamorphosizes into the Joker. Now, understand a couple things about this movie. First of all, the big discussion point is Joaquin Phoenix's performance as the Joker. This will be a talked about performance. This is going to be, I can totally see the parallels between this and Heath Ledger. Obviously, with the Heath Ledger performance, the controversy of him passing away shortly after shooting the movie was a big deal as to why that was such a critically, viewed upon movie, why people had so many eyeballs on Dark Knight. I don't want to compare this movie to The Dark Knight, but I will say that Joaquin Phoenix as the Joker is comparable to a Heath Ledger. There's a lot of similarities there, but Joaquin Phoenix took this by the balls and ran with it. This is a career performance for Joaquin Phoenix. If he wins an Academy Award, I would not be surprised. A nomination has to be in the works for him. And the thing about this movie is it was all him, okay? There are literally, as I'm watching this film, right, there are literally maybe 2 or 3 shots in the entire film that don't have Joaquin Phoenix in it. He is this entire movie. He is the embodiment of this movie. What happens to him, the way he thinks, the way he views the world, that is what this movie is. This is not a Batman movie, and to be real with y'all, it is not a comic book movie whatsoever. It has obviously an adaptation from the comics of the Joker. It's got the Wayne family in it. It's got Gotham City and Arkham Hospital. These are things that are in the comic, and that's pretty much where the adaptation comes to an end here. It's its own story. It doesn't tie into Birds of Prey or the DCEU, and it does not tie into any of the other Batman films, the Burton films, the Nolan films. It feels like a Nolan film, but it does not tie into any of those, okay? And I'm saying that because even though most of you guys know this, we may have some casual listeners who stumble upon this review. They might not know that. So understand, this is not part of any story. It's an Elseworld story. It's not part of the DCEU at all. And it's the story of Arthur Dent, discovering who he is, discovering the problems that he has internally and dealing with his past and how he handles it. What an amazing film. I mean, people have been comparing it to Taxi Driver, and it really is. Again, this is not Avengers Endgame or Spider-Man Far From Home. It's not that kind of movie. It's not even, Shazam. It's a very, very deep, disturbing psychological thriller, a character study, probably the best character study we've ever seen in a comic book film. I would say it's the best one. And yeah, there's been a lot of good ones, don't get me wrong. Iron Man 1 is a great example, but I think this is the best character study we've ever seen because it's all about Joaquin Phoenix as Arthur Dent. But what's cool about it is Robert De Niro is in this movie as this comedian talk show host. So that's cool how they had like a Taxi Driver type of vibe to it. And you've got the star of Taxi Driver in the movie. That was cool. There's only about 3 or 4 actors that really do a lot in this film. Other ones have like a couple of cops and bystanders, but most of the film is just carried by a very small cast led by Joaquin Phoenix. And like I said, he's amazing. The way the movie is shot, the set pieces, comes off very much film noir. This movie takes place in 1981. How do I know that? Because there's a scene in the movie where they show a movie theater, a very important scene, and in that scene they have Brian De Palma's Blowout being advertised, and that movie came out in 1981. So that's how I was able to figure out it was in 81. But again, the film is not about Batman. It's not about, any other characters but the Joker. And you see this man, and his struggles with himself, his internal struggle, the stuff he goes through, the discoveries he makes about his own life and the tragedies that befell it. And it's a very sad story. It's almost Shakespearean to me, because if you ever read Shakespeare, you know he's always doing really sad endings and things like that. Well, this movie has a very unique ending. I'm not going to spoil it. There are a lot of twists in this movie too. There was one twist in the film that I didn't see coming, and when it hit me, I was like, whoa, like that's brilliant. It came off like a Chris Nolan film, like Memento, where you're kind of replaying stuff earlier in the film, like, oh, that makes sense, you know. And it was so well executed and so well orchestrated, because there's parts of the film where you really don't know what's going on. Like, is Arthur thinking about things? Is it his fantasy or is it reality? It was so well done. Credit to Todd Phillips and to Joaquin Phoenix. This is a masterpiece, okay? I'm telling you that. And I've only seen the movie one time, so I always tell folks, go see a movie multiple times to get the real kind of cusp of it. But I actually want to go see it again, because it really, really was moving. It was disturbing. It was dark. And yes, there's a lot of things in this movie, in the current climate of the world, that are going to irritate some people, that might come off as insensitive. But this is a movie, and it's a movie that takes place in the fictional Gotham City. Even though there are parallels to the real world, lots of them, it takes place, you know, in a world that's divided, much like our world. So there are similarities, don't get me wrong. But what happens in the film is so just well executed. Like, the movie itself, if you take all that crap out of it, as a movie, does it work? Yes, extremely it works. Some people are going to sit there and say that, you know, oh, you know, it was offensive. Oh, it's crazy. I mean, it's a crazy movie, but what a ride. What a ride. Now, if you're going to ask me to compare it to Dark Knight, again, I think it has to be out a bit more for me to really think about that. Also, there will be comparisons to Avengers Endgame, and that's not fair. That is totally unfair to compare it to Avengers Endgame, because Avengers Endgame is a great capstone movie. Capstone movies mean the end of like a pyramid. You know, the top of the pyramid's the capstone. It's the end of the saga, the end of the Infinity Saga. We had 11 years of buildup, and Endgame, you know, nailed it with a satisfying ending, if you ask me. I loved Endgame. This movie as a standalone film, because Endgame does not work without the MCU. You can't just watch Endgame without the MCU, or you won't understand what's going on or appreciate what's going on. Like, you know, you got to see at least a few of the MCU movies, right, to really get what's going on. With this film, it's its own self-contained story, and as a film, as a story, I think it is slightly better than Endgame. I think it is. But Endgame was the most amazing finale to a saga in a long, long time. You know, but it's not fair to compare them. You know, because Endgame was probably more enjoyable for me. It was probably more fun, but this movie's not fun, dude. I mean, okay, this movie's fun, but not fun in that kind of way. This movie is dark, and it's very thought-provoking as well. Obviously, like I said, there's been a lot of controversy behind it, but in the world of Gotham, it's really not that different from other films. In fact, I would say this movie is just like a combination of like Deathwish, the original, not the Bruce Willis version, the original one with Charles Bronson. It's that mixed with Taxi Driver, mixed with The Killing Joke. Because it pretty much is like The Killing Joke in a way, but the story of Joker is different. You know, if you saw The Killing Joke or you read the comic, that's a masterpiece comic book, by the way, one of the best stories ever written. This is similar because it takes ideas of this man who has mental illness that's established early in the film. He has some form of mental illness. He's going to a therapist. And at one point, you know, he stops taking his medication, and, you know, things get worse and worse and they snowball. And so it's kind of the story of a more realistic story, I would say, in this version of the origin of the Joker. You know, and again, there's no tie-ins to the comic. So if you're going to go into this movie screaming and crying about how it's not accurate to the comic, it's not trying to be. That's not what this is, you know. But back to what I was saying, you know, comparing to The Killing Joke, it does have that same sort of like empathy. Like when you watch the movie, you have sympathy for Arthur because of what he's going through. But as the film progresses, his decisions and choices that he makes, I know it's the same thing, those two words, they end up kind of changing your perspective of him as a character. It was so well done. This was an incredible film. I'm calling it a masterpiece early on. I really am. Maybe I'll regret it in a few months. I don't know. But walking out of that theater, I was so impressed with just everything. Like, as a movie, it's a great movie. Not a great comic book movie or a great Joker adaptation or a great DCEU film, because it's not in the DCEU. It's just a great movie. We're going to come back with a spoiler review very soon, and we'll go into some of the decisions that were made in the movie, my thoughts on them. But man, The Joker is a fresh movie. Don't listen to people who tell you otherwise. And one more thing, this is not a kid's movie. If you got kids, dude, trust me on this one. This movie's screwed up. It is, you know what I'm saying? It'll mess, the kids aren't going to get what's going on. They're not going to understand. You got little kids that want to see like Spider-Man action. This is not, you know what I'm saying? Like, you know, they love Spider-Man or like Iron Man. No, this is not that kind of movie, dude. This is definitely a movie for adults, and one that I think will be remembered for many years to come. That's my review. Look forward to the spoiler review. We have a lot to talk about in that, plus more videos I'm sure I'll do. Thank you again for supporting World of Geekdom. I love you guys. Remember to take care of yourself and each other. Don't be like the Joker, please. Take care of yourself and each other.